Thanks everyone for joining us today, where we'll be delving into all things party conferences, including why and how to host events, securing speakers, and networking opportunities, to name a few. We're delighted to be joined by David Walsh, who is the Head of Public Affairs at WWF and who is fantastically positioned to lead the discussion on this topic, having accumulated many years of experience in attending and hosting events at party conferences, both within this role and in his previous role at CPRE. Before we kick off, it would be great if people could pop their names and organizations into your Zoom profiles. We are also recording this session, so this will be uploaded onto our website afterwards. And as usual, we'll be uploading a digital guide as well, which summarizes the key learnings from today. In terms of format, David will kick us off with his presentation for the first half hour or so. And as we're quite a small group, we'll have quite a bit of time afterwards to go through any questions you might have for David to answer. So without further ado, David, I'll pass over to you.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Nadia. Hi everyone. Thanks all for being here. It would be really helpful actually for me, just as I sort of kick off, if you all wanted to just put in the chat, like if you've ever been to party conferences and that kind of thing, because I know that I'm sort of pitching things at the right level. So as Nadia said, so I'm Head of Public Affairs at WWF. I've been in the WWF just over 5 years and Head of the Public Affairs team here for about 2.5. Before that, I was at CPRE for 3 years, started on their graduate scheme, and just sort of got thrown in at the deep end and sent to my first party conference that very September. I think I went to the Lib Dems on my own and just had to work out what was going on. But now I've been to about 20 of them, and hopefully can give you a bit of a useful insight into what they're for and what they're all about. So let me share my slides, as all good Zoom presentations begin. Hopefully you can see these things. So I'll do a little bit on kind of what a party conference is for, just to kind of set out that kind of thing, and then get into the detail of sort of how we go about planning our work at WWF, and some sort of helpful tips, I hope, on what you could be doing. And then thinking about sort of what to actually do at the conferences themselves and how to make the most of them afterwards. So just sort of starting at the very beginning, a party conference can be many, many things, and it does vary a little bit by political party. In general, they are the place that a political party gathers twice a year for their grassroots members, their local party groups, their MPs, their MSs, their MSPs, to get together and have a chat about politics. There will be a big main stage for speeches to be delivered, sometimes to a packed hall for the Prime Minister, and sometimes to a beautifully empty Conservative arena there. I couldn't even tell you who it is who's giving a speech in that picture. They are a place that kind of relocates all of the media circus of Westminster politics away from, and it gives basically an uninterrupted platform for a political party to make their case on their priorities to the country. They are also a massive way for political parties to make money. At the end of the day, they sell passes, they sell space for events, for exhibition stands, all of the activity that goes on in a fringe program of panel discussions and roundtables and private dinners. All of that is money going into the central party coffers, and a cynic would probably say that it looked a bit like paying cash for access, but I would never say such a thing. And obviously some parties at their conferences use them as a forum for democracy. They actually agree policy, particularly at the Lib Dem conference. Members and party groups can bring motions to be voted on by the party membership to determine what their priorities should be as a party. Sometimes that was the case under Labour, sometimes it's less so. So a bit of a varied system. The Tories, they don't have any votes. There's no party democracy. So each of those conferences looks quite different on the ground as to what happens day to day. And of course, there are always protests. You might remember the brilliant protest by our colleagues at Greenpeace during Liz Truss's party conference in 2023, or glitter being thrown on Keir Starmer. There's also always Steve Bray outside the party conference zone with his loudspeaker talking about why Brexit was a bad idea, and on basically anything else that you could imagine. There will be a protest happening outside at some point. And I think there's also this really interesting conversation that we can have maybe in the Q&A about reform, who are new to the scene. Party conferences for them are much more like rallies. And so what they look like is going to be very different. And whether we should engage with them as a sector is also quite an interesting conversation to have. But basically, it's 20,000 people gathering in a city, having a conversation about politics across all sectors of charities, businesses, media, politicians. And that's why we go. We go to be a part of that conversation, to listen, to engage, to meet the people that we want to talk to. So WF's approach has always been to start with why are we going? What's the point of this? It costs quite a lot of money to be there. Even if you're just booking a pass in a hotel, it can get you into kind of £500 for a week away at party conferences. So we really need to be clear about what the point of going is. After the last general election, we had 300 new MPs. We knew that what we really wanted to do was to be seen and to be visible, for people to know who we are, that we're an organisation that are active in politics, that we have asks of politicians. We wanted to make connections with those 300 new MPs and for them to get to know us. So we invested quite a lot of money in a stand in the exhibition space so that MPs walking around with nothing to do, because they actually were not particularly busy during conference, could be grabbed as they walk past, and we could have a conversation with them and tell them about our political priorities. We had a whole series of panel events at all of the party conferences on specific policy issues that we wanted to talk about. So we did something on deforestation policy and priorities for COP29. We did a panel events at all three of the kind of big three parties conferences on nutrient pollution, because we knew that the Lib Dems and Tories might be quite helpful in conversations in that space. We worked with colleagues across the sector on green drinks receptions so that we had like a moment to kind of bring everyone together and show the enthusiasm for climate action. We even did a private dinner with the Brazilian ambassador on priorities for COP30. And that really worked, right? People noticed us. We started to have some useful conversations to build relationships with MPs. But it also didn't always work, and we should be honest about that. Like, we didn't get ministers coming along to our panel events telling us what they thought about WWF policies. They'd basically been told by the government not to make any news. And the easiest way to not make any news at party conference is not to be present talking about things. And so we got select committee chairs on our panels instead, useful for relationship building, but not quite the kind of objective that we'd set. And so we're looking at that this year, and literally right now in the middle of kind of finalising the party conference programme for this year. We think that ministers will continue to be less available. We think that party members probably won't be turning up in great numbers because, well, let's face it, no one's particularly excited about and enthusiastic about politics at the moment. That, like, if you've got a kind of democratic process to your party conference, then those decisions feel much lower stakes when you're in government and the next general election is quite a long way away. Prices have gone up a lot for doing events. It's actually really expensive to go and do stuff at party conference now. And ultimately, like, our main priority at the moment is influencing the government. And if the government wants to make some news, they don't need to go to Liverpool to do it. They can do it in Westminster, and our ability to engage them in Westminster might be a better use of time and resources. So we're still going to be there. We're still going to have a bit of a presence, but we are going to scale it back a little bit, just to make sure that we're prioritising things that have the best impact for our political strategy. So what's something to think about, I guess, when you're looking at, as an organisation, what you do about party conferences is think about why it is you actually want to be there. Is it about visibility? Is it about people seeing your organisation? Is it about influence? Do you want to push sort of key policy ideas and get ministers to hear them? Is it just about intelligence gathering and being in the room during discussions and kind of gathering the political mood and the mood of the party? Or is it about networking? Because we're all going to be there, right? There's going to be loads of different NGOs across climate, nature, health, work, social security issues, housing, transport, and loads of businesses as well go and spend quite a lot of money because, as I said, it's cash for access. So, what is it that you want is a really important thing to start your sort of planning from, and that from that can come your kind of ideas about what engagement looks like. So, if you want a minister to respond to an issue on stage and get an answer for them on the record about something, about a specific policy area, host a fringe event, host a panel, and put a whole load of effort into getting a minister along so that you can get that question. If you want to have a sort of private discussion about like ideas and what the future of a certain policy might be, where there isn't that kind of like direct pressure from the kind of the public stage, host a private roundtable. But you could do that in Westminster, and that was quite a strong steer that we actually had from Labour Climate and Environment Forum. It was like it's kind of no point doing a roundtable in Liverpool. It'll cost you quite a lot of money, and you could do it in Westminster for half the price. And I think that's like a really important thing to think about just in the context of where we're at the moment. Like, what is it that's going to have the biggest impact? Is it being in a 10-minute chat with a minister at a party conference because you managed to grab them on their way from one thing to the next? Or is it going to be a sit down in their office or bringing them along to an event in Westminster? So I think the other thing is just that networking is a massively underrated benefit of party conferences. They are really good opportunity for networking. You meet peers from other NGOs, think tanks, industry representatives. And it's also quite interesting just to see how some of the organisations that we might be occasionally in opposition to operate. So, for example, the hydrogen and CCS industry always book out a massive stand space in conference. And we were directly opposite them last year in the exhibition hall, and they had basically every minister that they needed to talk to went along. So they got Ed Miliband there, they got Angela Rayner there, they got Anna Sarwar there, they got Ian Murray there. I'm pretty sure I saw the Chancellor go past at one point. They did a whiskey tasting with a hydrogen powered distillery, which actually doesn't exist. It's just it's going to be hydrogen powered at some point, and they got the chair of the select committee along to host it. And they get their 5 minutes. You know, it's really impressive actually to see how they do it, how much money they put into it, and that is kind of what we're up against a lot of the time. Heathrow is the same. They book out this huge lounge venue, which means that there's somewhere MPs can go and sit down and have quiet meetings with anyone. The MPs can take whoever they like in, but it's sponsored by Heathrow, so Heathrow gets to give them a little bit of their spiel every time an MP comes into the venue. And I mean, is it really that surprising that at the end of it all, third runway is going to get approved? So that's also just quite an interesting thing to see, and it's worth going along because the stuff that happens in Westminster when those bits of industry are doing their lobbying, we don't really get to see. So that really helps you understand the political context. So yeah, plan for that impact, know why you're going, define what you want to achieve, be really clear on what your targets are, and from there you can decide how many people you want to send, what type of event or presence is worth investing in, what it is that's going to get attention in a pretty crowded space. Like if you're in the exhibition space, you're competing with a guide dog, and the guide dogs are always the most popular stand because people get to go and have a little cuddle and a photo with them. How are you going to stand out in that environment? I was going to do just a little bit on timing. So, what will happen if you go to party conferences and you start having a program party conferences is that immediately after they finish in October, some really overzealous consultant will come to you and say, "What are your plans for next year?" And you will ignore the email because you're exhausted and it's the wrong time to start thinking about it. But I would say sort of January, February time, you need to start thinking about, are you going to go? What are you going to do? What budget and objectives you might have so that you can really make use of the time and the space. In around about February, March time, the booking system for booking rooms or exhibition space opens on the party websites. You submit requests through forms. It takes a while for them to process them, and by around about May time, you get a sense of whether you've managed to secure your rooms or not. It's also around about then that you start having, if you want to do partnership events with other organisations, with think tanks, that you start having those conversations because they'll be looking at filling up the spaces that they've booked. Round about now is time to be booking your hotels. Really, you could book your hotels in October. That is actually something you could do. I just never do because I always forget. But prices go up massively. There's not that many hotels in Liverpool, as it turns out. Now is absolutely the time to be booking your passes because you get early bird rates that expire in the first couple of weeks of June, signing all of the necessary contracts and paperwork and that kind of thing. Through July and August, you'll start getting your speaker invites out. You'll be confirming the title of your event. What is it that's going to draw people in? A pun is always quite good, so that you can get your event into the Fringe program, the physical book that you get that tells you all of the stuff that's going on at Pike conferences. And sort of towards the end of August as well, you'd want to start getting your meeting requests out to MPs and other stakeholders if you're able to use conferences as a time to get some useful meetings. And then over sort of September, you'd finalise your events, you start promoting them on social media, that kind of thing. Get really stressed about the fact that ministers still haven't confirmed that they're going to come. That always happens. You only find out that you've got a speaker confirmed about a week or two before the event happens. It's the worst feeling in the world. But they almost always turn up. You almost always get someone. And then you're into making it all happen, giving your briefings to your senior leaders if you've got events where you've got your chief exec on a panel, that kind of thing. Following up on all of the contacts that you've made and reviewing how it all went. Yeah, and we can get into all of that a bit more in the Q&A perhaps, because I think there's all kinds of interesting questions we could ask about like where in the city you want to be. Do you want to be inside the secure zone, past security, pass all the security checks, or outside? That's cheaper, but it means you're less likely to get ministers coming along. Like if you're booking a stand, do you pay more for a stand that gives you greater footfall, or do you pay more for a stand that really stands out and it's worth people coming and finding, even if it's a bit sort of out of the way in the exhibition space? Like when during the week should you have your event? All of those are sort of the kind of things that need thinking about from a kind of logistics perspective. And I would say something that I have almost always done. That didn't come out very well, did it? The quality of that picture. Anyway, something I've almost always done for Pike conferences when we've been doing events is to partner with other organisations. It can help you secure better speakers because you're just more interesting. One organisation on its own is not necessarily that much of a draw. It can help you share costs, which is really, really helpful. And by having sort of a broader range of voices on a panel, you can attract a more interesting audience. So back when I was at CPRE, we did a session on planning reform and the future of social housing with the Federation of Master Builders and the National Housing Federation and whoever the housing minister was, one of the 16 that there were in 15 years. And it was a really unusual crowd. Like the notionals, like NIMBYs, for want of a better word, alongside the builders and social housing organisations, all making similar cases for why action was needed. Got far more people in the room than if we'd done it on our own, and made it far more affordable than if we'd done it on our own. The panel that we did last year with Conservative Environment Network wasn't necessarily aimed at sort of a specific policy that we wanted to talk about, but because it was about like the politics of the moment, and these are ultimately political events, we got Michael Gove, the recently announced editor of The Spectator at the time, to come and share his views on what the role of conservative environmentalism should be for the party. So thinking about those kind of partnerships you can have with green groups, absolutely, with other NGOs, bringing health and climate conversations together is always really interesting. With politically affiliated groups like the Conservative Environment Network, the Labour Climate Environment Forum, SERA, and the Lib Dem Nature and Climate group. All of those are really useful ways to sort of create an extra draw, and also think tanks. So we did quite a lot last year, and we're going to do again quite a lot this year with More in Common, because you can combine the sort of expertise that they have and the independence that they bring with some really clear like political asks as part of the conversation. So that's planning ahead. Once you've got all of that stuff sorted, clear on who you're aiming for, you need to set out what your story is. You need a good elevator pitch for party conferences. You are going to be going from meeting to meeting, a random opportunity to talk to an MP as they brush by you at the bar or in the queue for some coffee, or just walking between one event and another. And if you can grab them and give them 60 seconds about who you are and why you're there, you can always use it as a chance to follow up afterwards and say, we met at a party conference and I really wanted to talk to you about this. And you were on your way somewhere else, but we had an opportunity to talk, and making that connection is so useful. So go through the conference guide, have a look at the events that are of interest to you, have a look particularly at the speakers that are of interest to you, because you might not want to go to an event run by the hydrogen industry, but if Ed Miliband's going to be there and nowhere else, that's the place to go and see what his priorities are and what he's going to be talking about. Coordinate with colleagues so that you can sort of maximize the number of events that you go to. But if you've got a question that you really, really want to ask a minister, one person in the audience isn't necessarily going to get picked. If you can get 3 or 4 of you along, all with the same question, and as soon as they open the floor to questions, you all stick your hands up, one of you might get the chance to ask it. Yeah, go to fringes outside of your policy area as well. Like, it's actually just a genuinely really interesting opportunity to find out all kinds of other stuff. Like, I've been to some really interesting stuff on like the future of fair votes and the role of AI and in tech. And like, these are issues that are broader political priorities, and what government thinks about them is actually quite interesting and relevant sometimes to our agenda, especially if they're more interested in those issues than they are in ours. And yeah, there will be useful coordinating functions on the ground. Green Alliance do a really good job of like helping set up WhatsApp groups and that kind of thing. So if you're knackered from talking to strangers and randomly bumping into people and networking and all that kind of thing, you can always ask where there's a friendly face with a drink and go and do something else for a bit, because they are long days at party conference, right? You start at 8 o'clock in the morning, if not earlier. You sometimes are still working and lobbying at drinks receptions until 11 o'clock at night. So making sure that you're kind of keeping yourself up to keeping your energy levels up, however that works for you, is really, really important. So yeah, this is the kind of that's the kind of at conference thing. I mean, I guess most of this presentation, most of the conversation, the most important thing really is to do good planning and to be prepared in advance for what you want to do and what you want to achieve. But once you're there, it actually all often kind of runs itself, right? You should know where your rooms are, your speakers are, but get to know the venue. They're pretty big spaces. There's usually, probably 40, 50 rooms that are being used for different panel events and that kind of thing, scattered out across various different buildings, both inside the secure zone and outside. So get to know the venue, get to know how long it takes you to walk from one event to the other. Take a notebook with you, always really important. You're not going to remember everything. You're definitely not going to remember all the conversations you had with everyone. Take extra pens as well. Listen, genuinely listen to what's being said. Plan your questions, ask questions, don't make statements. if you start sort of making a statement and it goes on a little bit, like 2, 3 minutes, particularly at Conservative Party conference, people will start tutting you. So make sure it's a question, because then you might get an answer. And if you don't get an answer, go and talk to the minister or whoever it was you're asking the question of after the event. They usually hang around for a little bit. You might be able to catch them and say, "Thank you for the answer, but I wanted a little bit more from you. Maybe we could talk in Westminster about it." Um, and keep an eye out for the kind of the people around those key influencers as well. Their staff, their advisors are always there. They're often the people where making that connection is even more important because they can help you get that even more useful meeting afterwards. Yeah, look after yourself. That's the most important thing, really. Make sure you eat. Make sure you eat something healthy. The food at party conferences is absolutely awful and it's really expensive. So if you get a chance, sort of between like 6 and 7, when the last panel event finishes and before the first reception starts, go out and get something that's actually quite nice to eat. And like I say, yeah, take breaks and step away if you need to. Um, if you're like me, I don't like networking. It's probably the part of my job I enjoy the least. It's really stressful. I find it really hard, particularly just like walking up to a group of people and inserting myself into a conversation with people I've never met before. And because there is a huge amount of warm, rubbish wine around, it's quite tempting to like just have another drink because it will help you sort of relax a little bit and feel better at doing that kind of stuff. But you're going to have to go back the next day and the next to be able to have the influence that you want. So yeah, don't force it too much. Pace yourself. Like the whole conference season is a marathon, not a sprint. And if you find that you're in the wrong sort of room or the wrong headspace, it's fine. There will be another opportunity. You know, go back to your hotel, go and talk to someone that you know, go and talk to a friend, phone home, get away from all of the horrible political people that there are around you. Drink lots of water, go easy on the alcohol because you are actually there to work. Pack some painkillers. Be prepared for the likelihood that you will get something quite similar to Freshers Flu because you're bringing 20,000 people from all over the country to the same venue in small windows with poor ventilation. Like you will get sick as well, particularly if you go to 3, 4 weekends in a row. And so just finally, that's what you'll look like. Favorite paintings. After the conferences, take some time, recover. If your organization does time off in lieu, claim it and take it. If they don't, you should ask them about it because you'll be working away from home very long days. So you should get time off. Try not to do all of them because it's just too much. But after the conferences finish, the next day or a couple of days after, have a debrief as a team, talk about if you achieved what you wanted, what impact you've had, any useful conversations you had, anyone you missed that you feel like you need to follow up on, and follow up on all of those conversations because conferences are the starting point for your work, not the ending point. They don't actually change anything. You don't get announcements from ministers because you went to party conference, but you do get the chance to build those relationships in a way that builds trust, that builds connection, and that helps you to make change happen. So yeah, plan early, know what you want to talk about, be strategic about what you attend and why you're there, look after yourself, and really follow up like it matters because that's really the most important thing. And I think I will leave it there. And yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions at all.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, David. Can definitely resonate with the point about networking not always being the most fun element. Yeah, we've got plenty of time for questions. I'd love it if people wanted to put their cameras on and pop your hands up and ask me yourselves, but I'm also happy to read out any questions from the chat as well. I'll just ask my question then while people get ready with theirs. But I was going to ask whether you had any tips about sort of the value in going to all party conferences, especially this year where it's quite expensive, and what the worth is in that.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question, and it's pretty hard to come up with a good answer, to be honest. So I think it's always worth going to the conference of the governing party. Like that, ultimately, they're the ones making the most decisions, and making the decisions that matter, and where you will be able to make the connections with the most important people, the most useful people. Um, we historically have always gone to all of the big three, um, but done sort of differing levels of stuff. So we would so last year we did a standard Labour Party conference, but we didn't do it anywhere else because it wasn't worth the money. Because like the Conservatives were going through a leadership election, they wouldn't be interested in hearing about WF priorities. They wouldn't come around the stand. No one was a minister or a shadow minister, so like who are you supposed to be targeting anyway? And they were all just completely obsessed with their leadership election. Um, Lib Dems, I think, is really useful, actually more useful than we perhaps expected it to be. I think they've set themselves up in a really like helpful position to be like propositional and oppositional to the government on climate policy. And so building relationships with useful, like with the likes of Tim Farron or Vera Hobhouse, but also all of their new intake MPs is really worthwhile. And actually, I think we didn't do enough of that at party conferences last year. Um, and the other good thing about Lib Dem Party Conference in particular is it's really well attended by local councillors. So if you do work in um, sort of more community based or advocacy based towards local government, um, there are some really useful connections you can make there, and it's worth going it from that perspective, I would say. Um, yeah, but this year we've always taken the position, and partly based on kind of our in-house legal team's advice, that we should be fairly balanced in what we spend our money on. So in the run-up to the general election, or in the 2023 general election, we tried to spend as much money at all of the party conferences, so that if an election was called early, no one could claim that we'd sort of overspent on one party over another. Um, because ultimately you're kind of making a political donation when you spend money on party conferences. So we wanted to be able to show that balance, and we're going to try and keep that going, even though like if your budget is limited, it's not necessarily worth spending any money on the Conservatives at the moment, is it? And reform is a really interesting question. Like I genuinely don't know the answer. Um, our our team in Wales is thinking about attending the Welsh Reform Conference, because they're likely to be the opposition party after the next set of Welsh elections. So they will need to work with them, and they've had some experience back in the days when there were UKIP members of the Senedd who were actually fairly helpful on some nature-related issues. Apparently, the only reason that Wales actually has nutrient neutrality or nutrient regulation laws is because a UKIP MS voted for them, because they had a conversation with her and she said, "Actually, this sounds like a good idea. I do care about nature in my local environment, and I want to know what I can do to help." So I I think they're going to go for that one this year because they've got an election next year and it's worthwhile. I don't think the Reform Conference is going to look like the other conferences. There's not going to be that kind of fringe program. There's not going to be that opportunity to engage. And even if there was, like if you ever see Nigel Farage or Richard Tice giving a press conference, like I could go along to an event at Reform Party Conference, stick my hand up and ask a question about climate change and why they're climate deniers and how they think they're going to help the people of Lincolnshire by blocking development that's good for 12,000 jobs and in their local area and all that kind of thing. But they wouldn't give me a good answer, and they would probably be quite rude. So whether that's worth your sort of time and emotion and money, I don't know. But yeah, it's an interesting challenge.
Thanks, David. Rachel's asked in the chat whether you have any tips on getting positions in panels where we're not able to fully host ourselves.
Yeah, that's good. good question. It's worth doing. I mean, I think the thing to do there is to sort of email the kind of the big organizers. So like uh, LSEF, SEN, the like IPPR, those kind of organizations who are going to be running um, sort of 20, 30 events over the course of the weekend at Labour conference, because they actually sometimes have a challenge filling their panels because they've got so many on. Um, so that making sort of connections and friendships with those kind of groups is probably the way to go, and sort of being connected with events organizers and that kind of thing, and just making the offer. Like in a way, there's no harm, right, in sending an email to the like events manager at IPPR and saying, "I'm going to be at we're going to be at Party Conference. Our chief exec is going to be there. If you're looking for a panelist to talk on issue X, Y, or Z, we'd be really happy to provide and to provide a speaker and to help." Um, the worst they can say is no. Um, so why not? You know, the some one place where I found it relatively easy to do that is in the youth zone. So there's always a section. Used to be sponsored by the British Youth Council, but they went bust. So I'm not quite sure who runs it now. It might be the Scouts. But they have a whole load of panels pretty regularly, and they get a decent sort of supply of ministers over the course of the day. Um, but they do find it a little bit harder to get speakers because, particularly on environmental issues, like they don't necessarily have the connections as organisations. So, like the Scouts don't necessarily know who to contact to get a speaker. So, going to those kind of groups, it can be a way in as well. Um, yeah, and like now is the time to be doing it because people are finalising their plans and signing them off and that kind of thing. Um, Also worth asking again in kind of early September when speakers haven't been confirmed and everything's a bit stressful, and they're like, "Oh my God, we need more people on our panel to make it worth people coming to." Whereas if you ask now, they might ask for money. So that's probably the way to do it to get it in for free.
Great question. Thanks, David, as well. Gina said, I'm curious about how you measure the impact of attending party conferences. For example, have you ever used outcomes from conferences to evidence the impact of your policy influencing, and what kind of things?
Yeah, so often when we've done sort of big programs at Party Conference with a stand and that kind of thing, we fund them through uh, like philanthropic donations and that kind of thing because it's harder to justify using supporters' money to do that kind of political activity because it looks a bit like you're using supporters' money to make a donation to a political party, which obviously you're not, but it looks a bit like that. So we often have to kind of report outcomes as part of our as part of reporting on those philanthropic gifts and donations. Um, so, um, but generally, I would say what we report on um, is more on like the relative success of the outreach rather than the impact that that outreach has. Quite hard to say that because we did an event and because we got a minister along, we changed something through being at Party Conference. Whereas what we can say quite clearly is that we planned to have interactions with 50 MPs by hosting a stand, and we did achieve that. So it's always a slightly longer game, I think, for impact, rather than the kind of yeah going to conference changes stuff.
Thanks, Gina. Will's got his hand up. So Will, would you like to ask a question?
Thank you, David. This has been really, really helpful. I've got a two-part question, if that's all right. Actually, the second part's more towards you, Nadia, I think, than David. David, I was just wondering whether you could expand, elaborate on what you see to be the kind of relative merits of, partnering with an organization like LSEF or SEN to hold an event, which, as I understand it, comes with a sort of heftier price tag than running a kind of standalone fringe event yourself, which obviously involves a bit more kind of organization logistics, I think, but is a lot cheaper, I think. And the second part, sorry, it was Nadia. Just Green Alliance did a really useful thing last year, which was a big sort of mega spreadsheet with all the different events going on and who the panelists were, where they had gaps, and offering up yeah, opportunities to be part of that. I'm just wondering if that's going to happen again. Please, can it do?
I'll answer the second one quickly. I'm not sure if it's happening, but if it is, I'll let you know.
Yeah, I endorse that. Good idea, Will. Please do that, Green Alliance. Yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, so you're right. I mean, the trade-off is basically on workload versus cost. We I've done both. Um, it's and you can have similar levels of impact with either, to be honest. So booking a room yourself, I think that you need to be more organized if that's going to be your approach. Like you need to be submitting your sort of room requests in March, April time. I think if you contact Labour Conference Services at the moment, they say submit a request, but we can't guarantee you will give you a space because it's closed to applications. But I think it's about £3,000 this year to get a room for an hour, which is obviously massively cheaper. And obviously, you also don't have to do that. You don't have to do it in the secure zone. If you're doing an event booking yourself, you can book a venue outside the secure zone nearby in a local restaurant or something and they can give you that space. Hard to convince a minister to come out of the secure zone because for obvious reasons, like they want to be able to get from one event to the next very quickly. But it is one way of doing things. It's much easier to do that when Labour are in opposition, actually. But you then have to do all of the legwork, right? Like it's if you're getting AV, you need to coordinate that with the Labour Conference Services team. If you're getting refreshments, you've got to coordinate that with them. And the really hard part of the work is getting the speakers confirmed. What a benefit is that you personally get to hold the relationship with the minister's diary manager, so that is quite helpful. And that's then someone that you'll be able to go back to over and over again with other questions. So that is quite useful. But it's hard work, right? And you will need to send quite a lot of follow-up emails and regular calls and all of that kind of thing. And ultimately, if you don't get someone good on a panel, it's kind of all on you. Whereas if Sen don't get as a good political speaker, maybe you'd have, if they don't get any MPs at all, maybe you'd have a conversation about whether they should refund some of the money or something like that because they've not quite delivered on the thing that you were promised. But yeah, it's much more expensive. So I think it was about £9,000, I think, to do a partnership with Sen on an event this year. That comes with a pass and sort of promotion to their networks, which is quite helpful. But then at Labour Conference, prices are absolutely insane. It's like £15,000 for a panel event, £25,000 for a drinks reception. They will negotiate. It's always worth negotiating because they just pick a number out of the air to see if they can get away with it, to be honest. But they then take on some of the risk of if they can't secure a good speaker and they take on all of the work, they might have better connections into those political into ministers' offices and that kind of things than you do. So it's easier for them to get the confirmation. And yeah, all of those kind of being able to promote it to their networks, I think, is also quite helpful. And like particularly with LSAF and Sen, like they book out a room for the whole of the conference period, so that's like the green hub. So if people are just like, all I want to hear about is green stuff, they just know to be there rather than having to move around the conference zone and that kind of thing. So you might get slightly better attendance as well. So yeah, and like what if you've done that and it is a little bit more money, you can always partner with another NGO or with business, that kind of thing. So like I said, we did that event with the RSPB. Last year we did events with Federation of Master Builders, National Housing Federation, and Conservative Home when I was at CPRE. Yeah, and that just then always gives you the opportunity to have some interesting partners, which again makes your event look more interesting, might make it more interesting for a minister to come along. So there's always that trade-off. I tend to prefer partnering because it saves you that stress and effort of securing the speakers. But it needs quite a lot more money.
Thanks, Will.
Thank you for such a comprehensive response. That's really, really helpful. Appreciate it.
Fantastic. Yeah, great question, and thanks, David. I can't see any other questions in the chat. So if that's it, then we get about 10 minutes of our afternoon back. But just want to say a massive thank you, David, for running this session and answering the Q&A so eloquently. And thanks to everyone who asked questions and who's come along today. As I mentioned, we've recorded this session, so that will be uploaded afterwards, and we'll share a guide as well. And I'll let you know if Green Alliance is putting together that spreadsheet. But yeah, thank you again, and enjoy the rest of your afternoons.